Mark was born into a humble home where his parents did everything they could to provide for him. Though they were not rich, their love and sacrifices ensured he went through secondary school and later gained admission into a higher institution. During his first year at the university, Mark met Cynthia, a beautiful and kind-hearted lady from a wealthy family. They fell in love, and Cynthia supported him financially, paying his school fees, providing food, and even clothing him. Their love blossomed, and after graduation, they got married with the help of Cynthia's parents. Cynthia's parents, as a show of support, gave her access to their two companies. Since Mark had no job, Cynthia put him in charge of one company until he found something of his own. Life was good, and they lived happily together. One fateful day, Cynthia was on her period, and Mark, being the caring husband he was, went to a clinic to buy sanitary pads for her. As he was about to enter his car, he heard a familiar voice call his name. Turning around, he saw Esther, his ex-girlfriend from the village. She ran to him excitedly, and they exchanged pleasantries. Esther was surprised by the car he was driving and immediately became curious about his success. "What are you holding?" she asked. "Cards," Mark answered casually. "For who?" "My wife, of course," Mark replied with a smile. "Do you have kids yet?" Esther probed further. "No, this is just the first 5 months after our wedding," Mark responded. Esther's face fell slightly, but she quickly masked her disappointment. Inside, she was plotting. "He has no child yet. If I push harder, maybe he'll choose me," she thought. Before Mark could leave, Esther requested his phone number. Without thinking much about it, he gave it to her. That simple act would later become his biggest mistake. At first, Esther only called occasionally, asking how Mark was doing. But soon, the calls became frequent. They met a few times at restaurants, reminiscing about old times. Slowly, Mark began to develop feelings for her again. What he didn't realize was that Esther was enjoying the lifestyle he provided without knowing that he was actually working under his wife. Esther, intoxicated by the comfort Mark offered, started pressuring him to leave Cynthia. "Leave your wife and be with me," she said one evening over dinner. Mark shook his head. "That's impossible, Esther. I love my wife." "Fine," she pouted. "Then let me be your second wife." Again, Mark refused. But Esther was not one to give up. She devised another plan, one that would tie Mark to her forever. One evening, Mark and Esther met at a hotel, where they spent the night together. But Mark, being cautious, insisted on using protection. However, after he went to the bathroom, Esther took the used condom and carefully inserted its contents into herself. 2 months later, Mark received a call from Esther. "I'm pregnant," she announced. "What?" Mark was shocked. "How?" "We used protection. Maybe it exploded," she lied. "I haven't been with anyone else." Mark was speechless. He knew the consequences of this. He was married. How would he explain this to Cynthia? Out of fear, he decided to keep it a secret. A week passed and Esther hadn't heard from Mark. Angry and desperate, she decided to take matters into her own hands. One evening, as Mark and Cynthia were relaxing at home, they heard a knock on the door. When Mark opened it, his heart dropped. It was Esther, and she wasn't alone. Her baby bump was already showing. Cynthia stood up, confused. "Mark, who is she?" Esther smirked and placed a hand on her belly. "Ask your husband." Mark knew that his world was about to crumble. Mark begged Cynthia not to leave him. She was hurt, betrayed, and furious, but deep down, she knew she couldn't let Esther take her place in her own home. After much thought, she decided to stay, but on her own terms. That night, Esther shamelessly tried to sleep in the same room as Mark and Cynthia. "I'm carrying Mark's child. I should sleep where he sleeps," she said confidently. Cynthia turned to her with an icy glare. "Not in this lifetime." She dragged Esther out of the room and locked the door behind her. Esther was forced to sleep on the cold tiles in the living room, serving as Cynthia locked the kitchen before leaving for work. In the mornings, Cynthia prepared food and ate with her husband while Esther watched in hunger. Mark secretly brought food for Esther after work, but for 7 months, Cynthia remained unaware of it. Then, one evening, she walked into the house and saw Esther eating. "Who gave you food?" Cynthia demanded. Esther smirked weakly. "My husband, of course." Filled with anger, Cynthia confronted Mark and later took back everything: the company, bank details, and authority. Mark was left with nothing, dependent entirely on Cynthia. A week later, Esther went into labor. Mark, despite everything, rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, she gave birth to a baby boy. But when the hospital bill was handed to him, panic set in. He had no money. Instead of facing the shame, Mark did the unthinkable. He ran away, leaving Esther and the newborn behind. For 2 weeks, Esther remained at the hospital bed. Eventually, the doctors, unable to continue providing free care, chased her out of the hospital bed, and she started sleeping on the floor with her baby. No food to eat. Out of depression and disappointment, he decided to leave her baby and abscond from the hospital. One night, she left a note at the hospital reception, along with Mark's phone number, and disappeared, abandoning her child. The next morning, the hospital called Mark. "By Sherlock," he answered. "Mr. Mark, your child has been abandoned here. You need to come and pick him up." Mark was speechless. He turned to Cynthia, dropped to his knees and pleaded for her help. Cynthia, though still hurt, saw the desperation in his eyes. After much thought, she agreed. Together, they went to the hospital, paid the bills, and brought the baby home. Despite everything, Cynthia took the child as her own. She cared for him, loved him, and raised him with warmth and kindness. Years later, Mark and Cynthia lived a peaceful and happy life, raising the child as their own. As for Esther, she was never heard from again. But Mark never forgot the lesson he had learned: the cost of betrayal is always greater than the temporary pleasure of temptation.